Bulgaria, 1972. A machine operator is cutting a trench for an electrical cable outside the city of Varna, and his shovel blade scrapes across something that should not be there. Something yellow. Within weeks, archaeologists are kneeling in that trench, staring at a graveyard that rewrites the story of power on this planet. One grave stops them cold. Grave number 43. An older man, tall for his time, laid out on his back, covered in gold. Gold bracelets stacked on both arms. Gold discs sewn onto clothing that rotted away thousands of years ago. A stone axe with a handle sheathed in gold. Over 2.5 pounds of it. Arranged on his body with the care you would give a king. Now, humans had honored their dead before. Tens of thousands of years earlier, a few people were buried with astonishing care, wrapped in beads that took years to carve. But those were rare gestures of love or grief. Varna is something else. Here, one cemetery holds more worked gold than the entire rest of the ancient world combined, and most of it lies under a handful of men, while grave after grave nearby holds almost nothing. This is wealth with a fence around it. Someone stood above everyone else, and everyone else stayed below. Here is the strange part. For roughly 300,000 years before this trench, humans like you left no trace of anything like it. No thrones, no palaces, no rulers. That silence was no accident. Your ancestors ran a system built to stop any man from rising this high. It worked for thousands of generations. Then it failed. One time. And the failure built the world you live in. This is the story of both. Leave the gold behind. Go back 20,000 years. Deep into the Ice Age. To a winter camp on a frozen riverbank. About 30 people live here. Hide tents. A couple of fires. Meat racks standing mostly empty. And that last part is the problem. The hunting has gone wrong for 3 straight weeks. The dried stores are getting thin. At night, you can hear a child crying from hunger in one of the tents. And every adult lying awake in the dark knows exactly what that sound means. Because every adult here has buried somebody. Now watch one man get up before dawn. He is not the biggest man in camp. 2 or 3 others are taller, heavier through the shoulders, better in a fight. It does not matter. And you are about to see why. He crouches over a line of tracks at the edge of the trees while the light is still gray. And he reads them the way you read a text message. Elk. A small group. He touches the crushed edge of a hoofprint and knows how many hours old it is. He pulls a pinch of dry grass apart, lets it drift, and watches which way the cold air is crawling along the ground. Because if the wind carries his smell first, this is over before it starts. 4 other hunters follow him out. Halfway through the morning, 2 of the younger ones want to push hard after the animals, straight across open ground. He stops them with one hand. He has seen what they have not. The elk are drifting toward a bend in the river where deep snow will slow them down. And a hunter who spends himself now will have nothing left when it counts. Or worse. A man soaked in sweat in that cold is a dead man by nightfall. So they wait. They loop wide. They let the land do the work. By late afternoon, a bull elk is down in the deep snow at the river bend. And that night the whole camp eats. Fat, marrow, Meat scorched over the fire. The child who cried last night falls asleep with a full stomach. So stand in that camp and answer honestly. Tomorrow morning, when this man says the herds are shifting east and the camp should follow, do you listen? Of course you do. Your kid ate tonight because of what he knows. Ignoring him would be stupid. And your family cannot afford stupid. Nobody voted. Nobody handed him a feather or a title. Following him is simply the smartest move available. So people follow. But here is the detail that should catch your eye. Watch this same camp a few weeks later. When the river ice starts rotting early and the group has to move before the melt. And suddenly the question is water. Which valleys still hold it late in the season? Now, nobody is looking at the hunter. Everyone is looking at a woman with white in her hair and a bad knee, because she has crossed this country more times than anyone alive. And she remembers a shallow valley 2 days south that stayed wet in a drought year 30 summers ago, when half the streams in the region died. Her memory is the map. On the day the question is water, she is the one the camp follows. That is how leading worked here. It moved. It flowed from person to person depending on what was trying to kill you that week. The tracker led the hunt. The old woman led the march. Another voice settled quarrels between families before they turned into something worse. Authority in this camp was a tool. The group passed from hand to hand. And when the danger passed, the tool went back in the pile. No record preserves this exact camp, but the pattern it shows you appears again and again, wherever people have lived this way. And we will get to how we know that. For now, just watch the hunter. He understood the arrangement his whole life. He grew up inside it. Then, on an ordinary evening in the middle of that winter, with the camp fed and quiet and the firelight on his face, something shifted behind his eyes. People had followed him all season, and he had started to like the feel of it. Somewhere in the back of his mind, a door opened onto a very old and very dangerous idea. He began to believe the following belonged to him. Spring comes late that year. And when it comes, the hunter gets hot. 3 big kills in a row. On elk. Then a horse. Then a bison bogged in wet snow. And every one of them found and finished because he called it right. The camp is eating well for the first time in months. And everyone knows whose reading of the ground made it happen, including him, especially him. The third kill is where it turns. The carcass comes into camp on poles, and before anyone touches it, the hunter plants himself next to it and starts talking. He tells the story of the hunt loud enough for every tent to hear. And in his version, 2 men vanish. The man who stood waist deep in freezing slush to cut off the animal's escape, the boy who ran most of the morning to bring up the extra spears. Gone from the story. In his version, there is one hero. And the hero would like the tongue and the marrow bones, the richest parts, set aside for him before the old people are served. And then he says a sentence out loud that has been growing in him all season. I have been feeding this whole camp. Feel how the air changes around that fire. Every head comes up. You have been in a room when somebody says the quiet thing out loud. So you know that silence personally now. If this were a movie, you know the scene that comes next. The camp strongman rises, spear in hand, and the 2 men circle each other while the crowd howls. Real life in a camp like this was smarter than that. A spear fight risks 2 dead hunters and a blood feud between families. Nobody sane spends that much to answer one arrogant speech. What actually happens is stranger than the movie. And we know it is real because scientists have watched it happen among living hunting peoples. What happens is laughter. An old man pokes the bison with one finger and shakes his head sadly, and wonders out loud why the great hunter has dragged home this bag of bones. A woman across the fire agrees. Skinny. She says, sick. Probably. Barely worth the butchering. Somebody asks, with a perfectly straight face, whether it tripped and died on its own before he got there. And was it not Kesh who stood in the freezing water to turn it? Strange that the story forgot him. The meat is magnificent, and every person laughing knows it. That is not the point. The point is aimed at the man standing over the meat, and he feels every word land. In the 1960s and 70s, anthropologists living with hunting communities in the Kalahari Desert wrote down this exact behavior and asked about it directly. Because it puzzled them, the bigger the kill, the harder the camp mocked it. Hunters were even expected to mock their own kills first. To walk into camp muttering that they had found nothing worth anyone's time, when a fat antelope was lying dead an hour away. One Kalahari man finally spelled out the logic for a researcher. And his explanation may be the smartest thing anyone has ever said about politics. When a young man kills much meat, he said, he starts to think of himself as a big man, and he starts to see the rest of us as his servants. We cannot accept this, so we speak of his meat as worthless. That way we cool his heart, and we make him gentle. We cool his heart. That is a security system running on jokes, and it points at something deep in our species. There have always been 2 roads to standing above other people. Down one road, people give way because you frighten them. Chimpanzees know that road well. Down the other, people move toward you because you are genuinely good at something they need, and they want to hunt beside you, learn from you, share your luck. Fear pushes, skill pulls. Humans are the animal that built its camps around the pull. And the laughter around that fire is the camp yanking one man off the wrong road before his feet get comfortable on it. Because remember what made him matter in the first place. The best hunter in camp was never important because he could kill an animal. He was important because everyone ate. The moment the food becomes a throne, the deal is broken. So there you are at that fire. And this is your test now too. This man saved your children in the dark of winter. Tonight he is standing over the meat, asking to stand over you. The joke about the skinny bison comes around the circle toward you, and everyone can see your face. Do you laugh with them? The camp laughed, and it worked. He took the mockery. He shut his mouth. The tongue and the marrow got shared out the way they always had. And for a while, the whole thing seemed settled. It was not settled. Laughter is only the first fence. The cheapest one. The one a camp tries before anything with real teeth. All spring, the hunter kept quiet and watched the fire and turned something over in his mind. He had made his claim too loudly. Out in the open, where jokes could reach it. He would not make that mistake twice. Summer. And the hunter has learned his lesson. Just not the one the camp was teaching. He does not boast anymore. He does not stand over carcasses making speeches. What he does now is quieter and much more dangerous. He starts building. Watch him work. A young hunter named Doru, strong and not too bright, misses 3 kills in a row, and his family's rack sits empty. The hunter appears at his tent with a shoulder of horse meat and says nothing about repayment. He does not have to. The debt is understood by everyone, most of all by Doru. A week later, he does the same for another young man, one with no father and no standing in camp. By midsummer, those two walk behind him wherever he goes. And people have started noticing that the hunter now speaks with 3 voices instead of 1. Then the suggestions begin. Around the fire, offhand, almost gentle. Maybe the meat should go first to the men who bring it in. Maybe old Tammuz, who cannot walk far anymore, should take a smaller share, times being what they are. Each suggestion sounds almost reasonable on its own. Line them up, and they all point in one direction, toward a camp where one man decides who deserves what, and everyone else waits to hear his decision. He is not bragging over a kill anymore. He is assembling a machine, and camps like this one had spent a long time learning what to do about men who assemble machines. The first response starts at the other fires, the ones he does not sit at. Talk, quiet, constant, corrosive talk. His name is in the air every night now, and not the way he would like. Someone retells the story of the bison speech. Someone else has noticed the meat flowing to Doru's tent and says so. Every night, in low voices. His reputation is put on trial. Examined, passed around. Handed back a little smaller than before. Camps like this had no judges. They had this, and a man can feel it happening to him without catching a single word. In the way conversations end when he walks up, in the way eyes slide past him. He can live with talk. Then the second response begins. And this one he cannot live with. Because this one touches the thing his whole plan is made of. The hunts stop working. A hunt like his needs 6 or 8 bodies moving as one. Runners on the flanks. Spearmen at the kill site. Someone to turn the herd at the right moment. Skill at reading tracks is worth exactly nothing without those bodies. And suddenly the bodies have other plans. One man's knee is bad. Another is repairing his spears. So sorry. Tomorrow, maybe. A third promised to take his son fishing. Nobody says no to his face. There is just somehow never a full hunting party available when he is the one calling it. The greatest tracker on the river stands alone at the tree line, holding all that knowledge, and it is dead weight without hands to use it. And behind the excuses, the third response is quietly gathering the heaviest one. One morning, the hunter looks across camp and sees a family taking down their tent. Poles bundled, hides rolled. A dog loaded with packs. No announcement. No confrontation. No farewell speech. They are simply going to live with the wife's people downriver for a while. 2 weeks later, a second family does the same. Understand what feet meant in that world. No borders. No fences. No walls to keep anyone anywhere. A camp was 30 people who chose every single morning to wake up next to each other. The moment enough of them chose otherwise, a leader was just a man standing in an empty field, giving orders to the wind. Walking away was the oldest veto on earth, and no ambition had ever found an answer to it. Now, stop the story for a moment, because this channel owes you the truth about how we know any of this. Nobody filmed that camp. No Ice Age hunter left us a diary. The scene you are watching is built from 3 kinds of evidence stacked together. Archaeology, which digs up the physical remains of camps like this one. Studies of hunting peoples who lived into modern times in the Kalahari, the Arctic, the Australian deserts, whose daily lives were recorded in careful detail, and comparison across hundreds of those records, looking for what repeats. Handle that middle piece with care. Modern hunter-gatherers are not living fossils, and no serious scientist treats them as copies of our ancestors. They are living peoples with their own histories. What they offer is a window into how human groups solve these problems at this scale. And through that window, the same picture keeps appearing. One more honest cut. This way of life was never the whole story. Along coastlines rich enough to feed crowds year after year, some hunting peoples built stockpiles. And with the stockpiles came ranked families, inherited standing, in some places even slaves. No farms required. Remember that detail. It is a loaded gun on the wall, and it goes off in the last chapter of this story. But across the whole messy record, one pattern shows up so often on so many continents that one anthropologist gave it a name that sounds like a joke and is not. The reverse dominance hierarchy. In most animals, the strongest individual dominates the group. In small human camps, the group organized itself to dominate the strong. The many banded together, sat on top. Any man who reached for the peak of the pyramid discovered it was pointing down at him. And here is the part worth sitting with. That equality was not innocence. It was politics. Hard, deliberate, unsentimental politics. A wall rebuilt every single day out of jokes and gossip and refusals and packed up tents against a threat that never stopped coming. Because in every generation, in every camp, sooner or later, there is always a man who wants to be king. By late summer, the wall is holding. The hunter's machine is starving. His followers are drifting. His hunts are failures. And his name is a punchline at fires he no longer visits. A cornered animal has 2 choices. And so does a cornered man. Back down. Or bite. He bites. It happens over a haunch of dried horse meat. At the end of a lean week, old Tammuz, the one with the failing legs, takes down meat from the shared rack to feed his daughter's children. It is his to take. It has always been everyone's to take. The hunter crosses the camp in 5 strides and knocks him into the dirt. An old man on the ground, bleeding from his mouth. 30 people standing frozen, and the hunter over him, saying the new rule out loud. Nothing comes off that rack unless I say so. Doru and the other follower drift up behind his shoulders. And the camp discovers that the machine was not quite as starved as everyone hoped. That night he walks the fires with a message. He knows some families are thinking of leaving. He names the downriver camp where the others went. And he mentions, in a voice you could almost call friendly, that the country between here and there is dangerous. Accidents happen on the trail. It would be a shame. Something new settles over that camp. It has never lived here before. Every person recognizes it instantly anyway. Fear. And with it, the question around the far fires changes shape. All summer, the question was how to cool this man's heart, how to shrink him back down to size. That question is gone. The question now is what happens to our children if this works. Play it forward the way they would have. If a man can strike an elder over meat and stand unpunished, then the rack is his. If the rack is his, the food is his, and everyone eats by his permission. And his sons grow up watching and learning what a man can take. Laughter cannot reach him anymore. He is past embarrassment. Refusal cannot starve him fast enough. Not with 2 armed men at his back and a grip on the stores. And leaving now means walking a trail he has promised to make deadly with children and old people in the column. Every fence has failed. What is left is the last one. Here is what the record shows. And it is one of the most sobering findings in the study of our species. Researchers who combed through accounts of hunting societies on every inhabited continent kept finding the same final resort, described in culture after culture with no connection to one another. When a man became a danger to the whole group, when mockery and avoidance and exile had all been tried or all become impossible, the community reached a decision together. The group talked through quietly, fire by fire, family by family, until the agreement was wide. And wide on purpose. Because a killing by one man makes a feud. Brothers obliged to avenge. Blood answering blood for a generation. A judgment carried by everyone belongs to no one. There is no single hand to blame. No target for vengeance. Nothing for a feud to grab. Responsibility spread so thin it simply evaporates. Sometimes the accounts say the man's own relatives were part of the talking. Sometimes a kinsman was the one asked to carry it out, precisely so that no other family could be held to answer for it. The death penalty for the man who would be king, older than any court, older than any law. Some scientists argue it may be the first political institution our species ever built. That claim is still being debated, and it should be. What is not debated is that the practice itself shows up again and again at the far edge of the record. So, one more time. You have been in this camp all year. You laughed at the bison joke in the spring. You watched the tents come down in the summer and thought hard about your own. Tonight the elders are moving from fire to fire. And the talk is low and slow and terribly calm. And it is coming around to your fire. To you. They will not make you do anything. They only need to know if you agree. Before you answer, hold one more thought. Because the people at that fire would have held it too. This machinery has no conscience of its own. The same jokes. The same whispers. The same quiet agreements that stop a tyrant can just as easily crush a man who is merely strange. Or brilliant. Or inconvenient. The wall does not check who it falls on. That is the weight of what is being passed around the fires tonight. This is not a clean tool. It is only the last one. Old Tammuz eats by this man's permission now. So do your children. Do you nod? The story does not need the rest of the night. Some things are told best by morning light. And in the morning, the camp is quiet. The racks are open. And the hunter does not wake up. No one speaks of it. No one boasts. No one grieves loudly. No one is accused because everyone decided, and a decision made by everyone leaves no one to punish. Doru is at the river by midday, checking fish traps, suddenly and deeply loyal to nobody at all. Within a month, the downriver families have word that it is safe to come home. Stand back from that morning, because from here, you can finally see the answer to the question this whole story is asking. And it is upside down from what you expected. Ask how ancient humans chose their leaders, and you are already picturing it wrong. You are picturing a ladder with a prize at the top, and some ancient version of a vote or a crowning to decide who climbs it. For most of the human past, as far as the record can tell, that ladder is exactly what our ancestors refused to build. Their real political genius was never a method for choosing rulers. It was a method for preventing them. They followed the tracker on the day. Tracking mattered. The old woman on the day water mattered. The calm voice on the day two families were close to blood. And the moment any of those people mistook being followed for being owed, the camp began taking the following back. Leading was real. Ruling was forbidden. What they guarded, joke by joke and fire by fire, was the difference. That system survived ice ages. It survived famines and feuds and every ambitious man who ever stood over a carcass and smelled a throne. It looked permanent. It looked like simply what human beings were. Then people started saving things. Fish. Drying on racks by a rich coast. Grain. Heavy in storage pits. And inside those quiet pits and racks, something was growing that no boastful hunter ever had. Something the jokes could not reach. The refusals could not starve. And the feet could not escape. The wall that held for 300,000 years was about to meet the storehouse. Start with something that does not look dangerous at all. A pit in the ground, lined with bark, filled with dried fish. For 300,000 years, everything that made a person worth following had one fatal weakness. If you were the ambitious type, it expired. The tracker mattered while the herds were moving. The old woman mattered while the water was low. The peacemaker mattered while two families stood at the edge of a feud. When the crisis ended, the influence ended with it, and the tool went back in the pile. You could not save it up. You could not stack this winter's gratitude on top of last winter's and sit on the pile. A storage pit does not expire. It sits there, full tomorrow morning and the morning after. A salmon run that crowds one stretch of river every single year does not expire. A herd of cattle breeds. A field of grain comes back every summer. And so does the good land under it. Somewhere along the way, in different places, at different times, human being, things that could be held, things that could be fenced, guarded, counted, and handed to a son. Now the gun on the wall goes off. Watch what the pile does to every weapon in the old arsenal. Un by un, laughter first. You can mock a boastful hunter until his heart cools. because the day he stops sharing, he is just a man with tired legs and no friends. Try mocking the man who controls the winter stores. Laugh all you want. He does not need you to like him. He needs you to be hungry. And February is coming. Refusal next. The old camp starved an ambitious man by declining to hunt with him, because his skill was worthless without their hands. A man with a full storehouse no longer begs for cooperation. He buys it. Every lean season, there are hungry men willing to work to guard, to carry a spear for the one who can feed their children. His wealth hires the muscle that his arrogance could never command. And then the oldest veto of all, the feet. Stand inside it for a moment, because this is the hinge of the whole story. A father on a rich coast. Generations after our hunter walks past the drying racks of a man he has come to despise. The racks are heavy with a year of fish. The man who owns them decided this morning which families would be fed through the storm season and which would wait. The father knows every trail out of this place. His grandfather would have been gone by now. Tents packed, family moving. The old veto cast. He looks at the hills, and he looks at his daughter, and he stays. Because out there is hungry country claimed by strangers. And here, at least, his child eats. The trails are still open. They just lead nowhere better. That evening, he brings his catch to the big man's fire. And he keeps his eyes down, and something 300,000 years old quietly dies. The people at Varna lived on the far side of that moment. A lagoon thick with fish. Trade routes moving copper and salt across half a continent. Some of the earliest metalworking on Earth. Wealth that sat still in one place, year after year, and could not be carried off by anyone walking away from it. Now, honesty. Because the real story is messier than a switch flipping. Storage did not create kings by itself. Some farming villages stayed stubbornly equal for centuries, pulling down every family that rose too high. What the pile really did was change the odds. It gave ambition something to hold. Add resources locked in one defendable place. Crowds too thick to scatter, nowhere left worth escaping to. And then the quietest ingredient of all, inheritance. A boastful hunter had to earn his following one kill at a time. And his sons started from zero. A storehouse passes to a son who never earned anything. And the following passes with it. Influence had finally learned the one trick death used to prevent. It could outlive the man. The wall did not fall to a stronger attacker. The attacker never changed. The same drive. The same hunger. The same voice saying, "I have been feeding this whole camp." Our species had been producing that man forever. And quietly, calmly, fire by fire. It had been stopping him. What changed is that the defenses stopped reaching him. The jokes fell short. The refusals bounced off. The feet had nowhere to go. So go back to Bulgaria, to the trench outside Varna, to grave 43. Look at him again. The older man under 2.5 pounds of gold, and see him properly this time. He is the hunter, the same reach for more than a share. Born into a different world. Now, no one knows how this one man actually lived. His bones cannot tell us whether he was cruel or generous, feared or loved. And archaeologists still argue about what his gold even meant to the people who buried him. He is not a villain. He is a marker because whoever he was, his grave belongs to the first kind of world where a man could rise that high and stay there, where standing could pile up, harden, pass to sons, and outlive every hand that might once have pulled it back down. For 300,000 years, give or take, no one could be buried like this because the camp would never allow the pile to grow that tall. Grave 43 is where the pile won. So, how did ancient humans choose their leaders? For most of the human past, they did not choose one at all. They followed the tracker on the day tracking mattered. The old woman on the day water mattered. The calm voice on the day two families were close to blood. Following was earned one decision at a time. And it was taken back the moment a leader mistook being followed for being owed. That was the whole system. And it ran longer than anything humans have built since. Long before we invented the crown. We invented the thing every crown still depends on. The decision to follow